Uh, Resource recovery is but a part of the management process, which aims at delaying the rate of consumption of natural resources. The term waste management usually refers to a single class, irrespective of its nature. Hence, we have different terms like solid waste management, plastic waste management, hazardous waste management. But waste management in itself is a very generic term. Next, please. Let's have a quick look at the principles of waste management. As I mentioned earlier, we are not focusing on the manufacturing sector, but on all waste that is going to be considered harmful for the environment. And like the municipal solid waste and other waste that is generated by industry and hospitals. Next, please. Okay, so all of you must be familiar with this waste hierarchy, which I have shown in the view file. And we must first understand that the hierarchy of waste as management methods for different wastes are not equal when they are considered, with relation to the environmental impact that they have. At the bottom of the ladder is the disposal in landfills. And this has been done for a very long, long time. And a time has come where the landfills are getting over. We are consuming more and more space for these landfills. And these landfills also have the biggest environmental impact. Besides requiring large amounts of land, there is a possibility of the leachate, which is formed in the decomposition process, which can infiltrate the ground and reach our water bodies. They also create foul smell. They give rise to rodents, excessive bird activity. So this is the least desirable option, and we have to, work towards almost a zero landfill aim when we are managing our waste. The next in line is waste recovery, which includes either anaerobic processes such as digestion, incineration, or energy recovery, gasification, pyrolysis. The whole various procedures and techniques to do this. Fuel is also made from waste, which is referred to as refuse derived fuel or RDF. However, we must remember that when we recover such energy and that energy is again, used, we are again kind of contaminating the environment. So this also is not a very preferred method in the waste hierarchy. The next one in the hierarchy is that of recycling. Recycling essentially means turning the waste into a new substance. Ideally, what we should do in recycling, which I actually keep having a discussion with Dr. Samir every time, is that we should recycle, especially about plastics. We should have technologies and procedures to recycle plastics back into plastics. You must have heard Mr. Ahuja talking about the DRS. That is an excellent system, an operation from an operational point of view as well as an environmental point of view, because we will be able to collect clean plastic and that plastic can be reconverted into granules and can come back as PET bottles. Thereby, we will not be requiring any natural resources to make these bottles all over again. The next in the hierarchy is, of course, reuse. We in India are quite good at it. We repair things, we refurbish products, and we refurbish spare parts also. But in many geographies, this is not a preferred method. There are a lot of people who have problems reusing stuff that or material that has been used once, and they want to go in for new products all the time. Thankfully, because of our social and demographic kind of fabric that we have in the country, we still believe a lot in reusing, repairing, and so I think we are in a fairly good situation out in the reuse concept of the waste hierarchy. The hardest of all options, then of course comes minimization, where we need to work together to say reduce packaging, reduce the use of natural resources, and thereby reduce the use of materials. So if we can reduce the amount of packaging that we are using, if we can reduce the use of various things that we are using, and of course the most difficult of the whole thing is that prevention of waste. which again means, useless material and keep using whatever products we are using, or keep using whatever tools we are using for as long as possible. But then again, this has its own implications. Companies which are manufacturing equipment, if you stop buying them, and the same equipment is going to be used for a very long time, then that company's sustenance becomes, so it's a catch 22 kind of situation. But a waste hierarchy is a good tool, for roughly estimating the impact of a waste management system and planning changes and amendments to it. We do use this in defense establishment, because especially in areas which are difficult to reach, where, forward areas, where you have to weigh against how environmentally friendly is it to either, take care of that waste in situ, or transport it by, again, burning a lot of fuel in the trucks to get it up or down from the hills and mountains. Next, please. And like I was mentioning, then there is the best environmental practical option. When we are taking care of waste, whether it be composting or recycling or such methods, there will be certain ways for which waste management options are very limited, or for which best practical environmental option, which I have been mentioning. In deciding what is the most appropriate disposal route, both environmental and economic costs and the benefits need to be considered. This decision we should reach by taking into account all the costs that impact and the impact associated with this waste disposal, include those associated with movement of waste. Whenever possible, the proximity principle should be used. That is, deal with the waste as near to the source as possible. For this, we need to raise more awareness and encourage ownership of the problems at local levels, and such things. So we should recognize that transporting of the waste also has an environmental, social, and economic cost. And as a general rule, we should, like I mentioned, deal with this waste as close to the source as possible. Next, please. And of course, lastly, the question before I turn to defense institutes is, why manage waste? So it is, having seen the concepts of waste management, it's here for all of us to see. I would like to put a disclaimer here that, a lot of figures that we get in the open domain, or even in research papers in India, are not through accurate data gathering. Unfortunately, they are based on a lot of interpolation and extrapolation. So when you start talking about, how much waste is generated and where is it generated, like especially for things like microplastics, there is a lot of talk about microplastics in the oceans. And it is quoted that the Ganga and the Brahmaputra among the 7 most polluting rivers. But when you ask where is the data and can you tell us, how you have arrived at this conclusion, we don't have any data. So a lot of research and work needs to be done on collection of data and analysis of the waste that we have, because the characteristics of waste, which I will explain to you later on in the talk, is fairly different from what is available in the open domain and what is available in the Western economies. Next, please. So coming to the main topic of waste management defense establishment, of course, defense establishment also have a need to manage their waste. And let's see whether there are any similarities or are there some great differences between managing waste in defense establishment. For that, we will first have to see what is a defense establishment, or what are the types of defense establishments. So I'll just take you through briefly, because a defense establishment has different roles, and we will just have a look at what kind of defense establishments are there, because that will dictate the kind of waste that is generated and that we have to handle. Next, please. Let us first have a look at training establishments, like the colleges that are there for, or schools and colleges that we have for basic education and professional degrees. The armed forces also have a lot of training establishments. So these training establishments are places where officers and the soldiers or men, as we refer to them, are trained for various professional duties, other training, uh, uh, other training that is related to their fields. Like I have done a master's in defense and strategic studies from the Defense Services Staff College. Then there is an Army War College, or there are the basic training establishments like the National Defense Academy, or the Naval Academy, or the Air Force Academy. So these are all training establishments. Earlier, they used to be largely based out of the towns, but over a period of the last 70, 74 years, these establishments have now come within the ambit of the municipal corporations or the urban local bodies, as we call them. Essentially, what happens in these establishments is that there is a large number of students, either cadets or officers, and there is staff which is going to teach them. In addition, you will have the support staff. You know, if people are staying, then you will have the domestic help also staying there. So the waste in these establishments would normally be quite similar to what you can see in a say university or in any municipal area, because these are not really fighting units, and people are coming here to study and they're staying. So that is about training establishments. Next, please. Then there are field areas. Now, field areas are referred to as places which are either close to the boundary or the national boundary that I'm talking about, or places which, like Air Force units, which operate aircraft which are deployed to safeguard our borders. Or in naval parlance, field areas can be getting appointed to ships, because a ship, naval ship, keeps sailing out at sea, guarding our not only at 12 nautical miles, but guarding our economic zone, which extends to almost 200 plus nautical miles into the sea. Because as most of you might be aware, that every country has an exclusive economic zone, which is about 300 nautical miles from a baseline taken from the coast, and all the natural resources found underwater up to that length belong to that country. So there is a very big need to guard our not only the borders, the land borders, but the coast land borders, in the sense the coastal borders, but also the economic zone, because that is where a lot of natural resources are held. Now you are going to find very different kind of waste coming out of these establishments, because an army border post, which is located at present where I am in Leh, there are only mountains, and these are typically non-family stations. So there are only the jawans and the officers who are posted here. So the weather is very hostile. So you're going to have a different kind of waste out here. It's not going to be like what we saw in training establishments. Next, please. Then we come to peacetime locations. Now, peacetime locations are a bit different than training establishments in so far as the kind of population that exists in these establishments. These are the normal establishments which you will find in any cantonment in any city. There are about 62 cantonments, if I'm right. So these are, they will typically have an office space. They will have a residential area, and they will generally kind of mimic small towns in themselves. Like a cantonment actually is nowadays like a small town in itself. For just to give you an example, there is the Eastern Naval Command of the Indian Navy is there in Visakhapatnam. There are a whole lot of units based in Visakhapatnam. There are a lot of ships. There is a dockyard. There are a few training establishments too. But all the housing for the officers as well as the sailors are located in only one or two areas. So, there is a residential area where people working in different offices or different bases come and stay in one place. So again, the waste generated from these areas is going to be different, because residential areas is going to have a very typical residential waste pattern with very little commercial waste coming out there. And of course, the office areas is going to have a different kind of waste. Next, please. So now that we've seen the three broad categories of defense establishments, all these establishments would have these three categories, of classrooms, offices, and administrative blocks. So the waste that you will have predominantly in these areas would be either stationery or paper or such like things. Now with a lot of things going online and digital, even the paper waste that is there is reducing. One more issue about the waste generated in these areas is that no paper from most of the service establishments is allowed to be thrown as is. We need to shred the paper for national security reasons before it can be either burnt or disposed of. Depending on the security classification, you have to burn some kind of papers. Rest of them can be sent for recycling. And most of the stationery is returned from where it is issued. So the kind of waste that you find in these areas is, pretty limited and largely dry in nature. Next, please. Now, all establishments, would have what we call as a mess. Mess is essentially composed of two parts. There is a living accommodation where either the officers or the men, Jawan, sailors, airmen, whatever you have, where they reside. So these complexes are essentially single room or double room quarters. And that is where the personnel live. And then you have a dining area. So the dining area will have the dining space will be there. There will be a kitchen there to cook the food. And of course, there will be some recreation room. There might be a TT table and a TV room or a library. So when you say a mess, it actually includes all this. Now, the sources of waste again will differ from these two areas, whether it is living accommodation or whether it is dining area. Because from the dining area, what you will get is largely wet waste. The personnel just go there to have food and come out of that area. Whereas, next, please. Dr. Irfan, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, and so from the living accommodation, you will get the other kind of waste. In service establishments, you are normally not allowed to have food in the living accommodation area unless some person is ill or nowadays if is in quarantine. So what will come out of the living accommodation, unlike what comes out from the dining area, is just dry waste. It will be plastic, glass, packaging, paper, and then you'll have the domestic rejects like the some bandage or some sanitary waste, etc. Next, please. The dining area waste I have actually covered. It will, be largely what we were talking about. It will be wet waste, and the dry waste will generally comprise of the packaging material in which the raw food has been packed and delivered into the area. Next, please. Now, typically in most service establishments, there were legacy systems, till the mid 80s or so, because these areas were far away from the population. They were in remote locations. They had these incinerators, natural incinerators, where the waste was burned. Now, in those days, we didn't have so much plastic. There was not much awareness of what incineration would do to the environment. So a lot many places, even today when you go, these photos, the bottom left photo that you can see is an old incinerator which is now disused, which is not being used as an incinerator. It is just a collection point for waste. And then, of course, the bottom two pictures on the right of the screen you see are, in high altitude areas where it gets very cold and then the waste is burnt out there even today. But these are legacy systems. Things are changing slowly. As regards the wet waste, what used to happen earlier and does happen to a large extent in field areas is the waste food is normally given to animals which are there on the campus. Again, this is possible because these areas are very large. There are a lot of open spaces. You do have stray cattle in some places. You have wildlife also. So and it is just food, So it is normally given off to these people, these animals. Having seen these different establishments and what happens, I want to draw your attention to something which might be of interest to you all, and which I have been, involved in for many years of my life. That is waste generation on naval ships. Next, please, sir. So waste generation on naval ships, let's look at these points. That is a source of waste, legacy systems. Is there or was there a need for regulation? What are the regulations in force, and what is the status as of now as regards to Indian naval ships? That is our warships that we have at sea or in harbor. Next, please. Now, a warship is a very generic term. The ships in the world over, and especially military ships, are classified into various classes, like patrol boats being at the lowest end of the spectrum, to aircraft carriers which are at the broader end of the spectrum. Uh, though both of them would be put to sea, you can see the difference. In a patrol boat, you would have a crew of about 39, and the length of the patrol boat would be in the range of 2-digit in meters. Like the patrol boat that I've shown you belongs to the Indian Navy and is just 52 meters long. Whereas the aircraft carrier on the right hand side has a crew of almost 1600 personnel, and the length overall is about 284 meters. Now, mind you, this is our aircraft carrier Vikramaditya, which I have shown, and this is not one of the largest carriers in the world. The American carriers are much larger than this. So, but to bring a point now, depending on what the ship is, like a patrol boat is usually used for patrolling the coast, whereas an aircraft carrier is more of a deterrent kind of thing and is put to sea for longer periods. Uh, so what waste is generated on these ships? It will normally be where there are people, there will be food. So you will have the normal waste that you can see anywhere. But how do you destroy this waste? What do you do with it? We will come to that in some time. Next, please. Now, the sources of waste on a ship, like I mentioned, there would be normal food waste. There would be the packaging waste, that is the plastic, glass, tin, and paper, which has come into the raw material, food, etc., stationery, whatever has been got on board. There is used cooking oil, which again, which has to be disposed of in an environmentally friendly way. And then there is something very peculiar in all ships, whether they are warships or they are merchant ships, is what is called the bilges. What happens is when the engines run, there is an overflow of oil or there are some leaks, and this engine oil or the gearbox oil would drip onto the floor. And this is a very common thing. And this waste oil generally accumulates in a compartment which is called the bilge compartment. This is between the outer hull of the ship and the floor of the engine room. It is designed that way because you don't want the engine oil to fall onto the floor plate where personnel are operating. As technology is increasing, the quantum of bilges, as we call them, is reducing very fast. Notwithstanding, you still have some amount of bilge oil that is there, and this needs to be taken care of. A lot of ships have water oil separators to take care of the bilges that are created. This used to be a very big problem earlier. Let us see what happens now. Next, please. So again, seeing the legacy of waste disposal on ships. Earlier, there were fewer ships in the ocean. Warships were few, merchant ships were few, and the waste was easily dumped into the ocean. Also, we must remember that, like in other places, the amount of plastics was very little. The food usually came wrapped in either gunny bags or paper, and it was believed then that if you threw all of this into the water, the food waste or the packaging waste, which did not have much of plastics, would get consumed either by marine life or would degrade on its own. So since there were very few non-degradables, people didn't really bother. Human waste was again jettisoned out into the sea, which was consumed by the various marine life. And like I keep mentioning, since there was little plastic packaging, and because there were very few ships in the ocean, uh, dumping it overboard was not considered to be such a big problem. The only problem in all this was used oil, whether cooking oil or the bilges which I mentioned. It did have then, and it has now, potential to cause very serious harm to marine life. But like other things, everyone thought that I am only disposing of so little oil. So what will happen? This such a big ocean, and few liters of my oil would not harm anything. And that was the belief pre 1990s or so. A lot of things have changed now, and we will come to that in a bit. Next, please. As the traffic in the oceans and the seas increased, like everywhere else, there was a requirement of a regulator. And the regulator was the International Maritime Organization, which was set up in 1958. Incidentally, the thought of setting up a regulator came way back, almost 10 years before the organization was set up. That is 1948. In an international conference, it was decided to, form the IMO, as it is called. The IMO entered into force, like I mentioned, in 1958, and the first thing they took care of was safety of life at sea. Because in 1950s, 60s, no one really was bothered about the pollution, etc. A lot of development had taken place in the type of ships that were put to sea, courtesy the developments in technology during the wars. And the first thing that came out, which is known as the SOLAS, or Safety of Life at Sea, in 1960s. And as things continued, in 1973, the International Maritime Organization adopted the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, or it is called MARPOL, that is Marine Pollution Convention. But this didn't happen all of a sudden. There is a small story or history to it, which I would like to share with you. Next, please. One of the biggest and first oil spills that happened was the Tory Cannon oil spill. What happened was on 18th March 1967, a super tanker by the name of SS Tory Cannon hit rocks off the coast of Cornwall, that is United Kingdom, and spilled more than 100,000 tons of crude oil into the English Channel. As a result of this, what happened was that beaches were left with knee-deep sludge, and thousands of birds, seabirds that is, were killed in what remains till date one of the biggest environmental uh, accidents in the UK. It was one of the first major oil spills, not only in the British and European waters, but almost anywhere in the world. And it caused huge damage to marine life as well as livelihood of people, because all this oil, washed on into the coast, and fishing became a problem for people. It is estimated that more than 15,000 seabirds were killed. And this destruction of these birds actually had a direct impact on sanitation, because these were the birds who were feeding on the rubbish that was lying on the beaches. Now, because these birds had gone, the rubbish on the beaches started decaying. And it is said that the effects of this spill continued for nearly 20 odd years, and the working on organisms from the bottom of the food chain, that the planktons which were there at the bottom of the sea, coming up to the smaller invertebrates that live in the sediments, through mussels, clams, and right up till the fish and the birds which feed on the fish, as well as the mammals that are there in the sea. So, next, please. So the Tory cannon oil spill resulted in the IMO, taking notice and introducing a series of measures designed to prevent not only tanker accidents, but mainly to minimize their consequences. It also tackled environmental threat caused by the routine operations such as cleaning oil, cleaning the cargo tanks, because these large merchant tankers, they carry various kinds of cargo, and once the cargo is emptied, you have to clean the tanks to take the next lot of cargo. Uh, so this Tory Cannon incident was a very big wake-up call for all mariners. And while they were, talking about prevention of tanker accidents and the resulting spillage of the cargo, they also then took on about how to regulate the cleaning of these cargoes and disposal of the engine room waste. So that is the bilge oil, etc., that I was talking about. The International Convention for Prevention of Pollution from Ships, that is of 1973, and which was modified by a protocol of 1978, came to be known as MARPOL 73/78. It covers not only accidental and operational oil pollution, but also all pollution that is caused by chemicals, goods in packaged form, sewage, garbage, air pollution created by these ships, everything. Next, please. So this MARPOL 73/78 actually exists through has a number of annexes regarding each type of waste. I've just listed them out for general information, like Annex 1. Annexure 1 talks about engine room waste, which we were talking about earlier. And Annexure 2 talks about carriage of noxious substances, which was introduced in 1987. Then Annex 3 also talks about the standard of packing material and this annex came into 1992, and it contains general requirements for the standards of packing, marking, labeling, documentation, stowage, uh, of all the package that is carried on board these ships. So you have these huge containers, they have got certain, packing methods of packing, so that if they are to fall into the sea, they should not start polluting, their cargo should not start polluting the sea for some time at least, so that they can be recovered. Then came Annexure 4, which came into vogue on 2003, in September 2003, and it was for pollution due to sewage, because a lot of sewage was being dumped into the sea. This largely relates to coastal waters, but and ports, because you can't dump sewage in ports. It dirties. It has its own problems to the environment. So Annexure 4 deals with that. Annexure 5, which we are talking about, is the regulation for prevention of pollution by garbage. And this came into force in December 1988. It actually specifies the distance from land in which materials may be disposed of, and subdivides them into different kinds of garbage, like types of garbage and marine debris. The requirements are much stricter in the number, and the areas are specified. Like if you have to dump certain amount of waste into the ocean, there are areas which are mentioned that you can dump this kind of waste in this area. And there is a complete ban on dumping of plastics in the ocean. While you can dump some degradable material into the oceans, but dumping of plastics is a complete ban. Whatever plastic packaging or whatever plastics you have got which have become unserviceable on board have to be brought back to port and disposed appropriately. The latest one which came into force was the Annexure 6, which came in May 2005, and it introduces the requirements to regulate air pollution which is emitted by ships, including emission of ozone depleting substance and shipborne incineration. Because what people started doing was they started incinerating their waste, on board only. So then they were generating a lot of air pollution. So this was also subsequently regulated. Next, please. So this is a general figure I wanted to show you, where they say, which I was mentioning, that where you can, dispose what area. So you can see garbage type plastics disposal is completely prohibited. Dunnage, that is the cordage, the coir wires, etc., ropes which are used, they can be disposed in outside special areas. again, paper, glass, metal, crockery stuff, which is believed to degrade or will sink to the bottom, can be disposed in other than special areas. Now, these areas are very clearly demarcated on the navigation charts of all the oceans of the world. These areas are demarcated. Then food waste, which is not contaminated or ground, and food waste which is contaminated, again, they can be disposed of only at a certain distance from the coast. So all these things have been introduced for keeping the oceans free, to prevent at least plastic dumping by mariners into the sea, to in an attempt to keep the environment clean. Next, please. So the naval ships, the earlier ships that we had, we did not even have, sewage treatment plants on board. The ships were very congested. There was no space to keep the garbage. So, like I mentioned, pre 1990, we would just dump the waste into the sea. But as we started getting more environmentally conscious and international regulations, because we are, in international waters and dealing with other navies, etc. Almost all naval ships are now in compliance to MARPOL. Those who are not are getting modified to become MARPOL compliant. Like I remember the way back in 92, 93, we had gone to one of the neighboring countries, and they had instituted, their port was MARPOL capable, and we did not have a sewage treatment plant. So when we entered harbor, we had to shut down all our washrooms, and we had to go ashore in portable washrooms. And for the couple of days that we stayed on board, all our bathrooms had to be locked. So it doesn't happen now because our ships are compliant. We do carry our STPs, and we have made spaces now for storing the material that is used on board, and all the packaging material for food, used oil, any scrap that is generated when you repair, equipment on board, and as well as used stationery. All of them is now brought back. When it comes to port, when the ship comes to base port, there are areas which are demarcated in every port where this waste that is collected is kept. This is largely dry waste I'm talking about. The wet waste, like I mentioned, the food waste is still allowed to be dumped into the ocean beyond a certain limit, because that is food and it can be consumed by marine life. But once brought alongside to a port, all this dry waste is collected, and then it is kept in specific areas in the ports. And when the sufficient quantum is available, the port authorities, the naval authorities at ports, contract agencies which come and collect this waste, and then they take it away. Next, please. Now, this is about what I was telling you about ships. Now, coming back to shore establishment defense projects, a lot of establishments have started composting their wet waste. So, though a few of them use organic waste composters, a large number of them who don't have a problem of land availability, they have composting pits which are made over land, and there are people who are appointed or hired as conservancy staff who look after this wet waste, and the wet waste is generally put into these composting bits. There are issues of segregation as of now, like there are everywhere else in the country, but they are slowly being addressed. Awareness programs are being conducted in most defense establishments. There are biogas plants which are being set up not only in naval bases but also on bases of other services like the Army and the Air Force. The Air Force in particular, I would like to mention, is very concerned about the wet waste. And not only in their areas, but also within 10 nautical mile, 10-kilometer radius of an air station. The reason being that any waste that is dumped in the open within the surroundings of an FO station tends to attract birds. And these birds are a menace for aircraft. especially fighter aircraft which fly at very high speeds and are very less maneuverable when you come in for a landing because the speeds are low. They are highly maneuverable at high speeds, but at low speeds, maneuvering is very difficult, and they typically come and land at about 120 to 140 knots, which translates to about 250 odd kilometers an hour. And very difficult to avoid and bird at that point in time. So Air Force stations are very particular about the wet waste that they handle, like I mentioned, not only within the base, but also in the vicinity of the base. The dry waste is still an issue because of collection issues, especially after the solid waste management rules for 2060 or 2016 have been implemented. There has been a lot of attempts by various establishments to get agencies to collect their dry waste. Uh, as far as the Navy goes, the naval base at Cochin, which is largely a training establishment, has tried and is experimenting with a full plastic recycling plant. So all the dry waste, all the plastic dry waste that is collected within the naval base, the establishment as well as the residential areas is collected and is recycled. The photos you can see are the project where the plastic recycling is happening in the naval base in Cochin. Composting units are available, like I mentioned, at various places. Lonavala and Jamnagar are two bases where I am involved with, and we are doing above land composting out there. What we do is we help the establishment to set up these composting units. We monitor them, and we also tie them up with recyclers who will carry away their dry waste, so that the dry waste also gets catered for. A big program for segregation and waste collection was started in Port Blair, I think sometime in 2016, 15, 16, if I'm not wrong. Port Blair has a large tourist population, and with that population comes a lot of waste. As you're aware, that Port Blair is almost 700 nautical miles from the Indian coast, and they don't have so much land where they can dispose of all their waste. Though wet waste is managed on board, the dry waste is carted away to mainland India. There are a few companies. I think one of them was Recycle. Maybe Dr. Samir Joshi has mentioned to you about that company, and they helped navigate this problem of plastic waste, where the plastic waste from Port Blair was shipped across to, I think, Chennai. I'm not sure which port it was shipped to, but it was shipped to Chennai, and now there is a constant connect between the waste handlers in Port Blair and the recyclers in mainland India, and as and when there is enough plastic waste, it is shipped across. Why I'm saying Port Blair, referring to Port Blair in this topic is because Port Blair has a very large defense population, and like say Ladakh, it's largely Navy. In the last 15 years, the Air Force and the Army units have also been co-located in Port Blair. So most of this work about waste handling, the segregation, was steered by naval personnel initially, and the joint services and all the three services subsequently, along with the local population. Next, please. Okay, so what I was referring to just now was largely of establishments which were handling their waste on their own. We also know that there are cantonment boards in the country. There are almost 62 cantonment boards which are directly under the Ministry of Defense. So I thought it was only right to comment on what they are doing. Since they are under the control of the Ministry of Defense, they were all of them were told to amend their bylaws to include solid waste management. This happened subsequently to the issue of the solid waste management rules of 2016. And by 2018, all the cantonment boards had amended their bylaws. Like all other things in service establishment, one cantonment board, which was Delhi, was given the task of framing these rules. It was vetted by a team. It was sent across to other cantonment boards to see whether additions could be done, and then these bylaws were framed. So that is about the waste management in defense establishments. Next, please. You all must be aware of this gentleman. He is Dr. Edward Deming, and he is was an American statistician, professor, also an author, lecturer, consultant, and is perhaps best known for this phrase: "In God we trust. All others bring data." Now, why I am quoting him and why I have referred to his statement is which I will come to you in a bit. Next, please. So waste management, like I mentioned, data is what proves your systems. Unless you have proper amount of data, you cannot run your systems. You cannot build your technology. And unfortunately, when I started studying waste management, solid waste management in particular, I saw a whole lot of data that is different, which I mentioned earlier also. The quantum of waste, the location and geography of the waste generation area would affect your waste management system. The characterization of the waste would affect it. And since the data is being very easily extrapolated from one place to the other, it is very difficult to set up a waste management system. Now, next, please. Now, this has a very large impact on the waste management systems that one can develop in defense establishments. I say this because there are some peculiarities in a defense establishment vis-a-vis the population outside a defense establishment. The first being that there is a lot of floating population, in the sense that service personnel is appointed to a particular unit or establishment for a period ranging between 6 months to 3, 4, 5 years. And then that person has to go to his or her next posting. So this is what I mean by floating population. There is never the same person in the same geography. Uh, Again, there is a mixed community. The level of a demographic mix in a defense establishment is much large as compared to what you can see in a area under an urban local body. Since the defense forces comprise of all communities and all people from all parts of the country, we have a huge amount of what do I say, the food habits of the people vary considerably as compared to what you see in the city part or the urban local body where the defense establishment is situated. Like, for example, I come from Pune. Pune has a predominantly Marathi population in one part of the city. It has a mixed or cosmopolitan population in another part of the city. But the National Defense Academy, which is also co-located in Pune, has a mix of all this. So obviously, the waste that is going to be generated in the National Defense Academy is going to be different from what is there in Pune, and hence the metrics are going to be different. And this was very evident because, like I mentioned, when you have to make a waste management system, or design technology or choose technology for waste management in the defense establishment, this is where the challenges come. Like here I am in Ladakh for the last few days. We've been meeting various personnel. Elsewhere in the country, we can compost our wet waste. Here, come October, the temperatures will start dropping and they will go into to -10, -12 degrees. So how do you compost it? So what do you do? So these are the challenges which other than the ones I've mentioned, the floating population, the mixed community, varying food habits, customs, traditions, the geographic location and the environment also have a big impact on handling waste management systems in defense establishments. And again, they vary from place to place. If we institute something in the National Defense Academy, it is not going to work in some establishment in, say, Leh Ladakh or Kashmir, and or for that matter in Jaisalmer and Jodhpur. Uh, Next, please. So this, which I have been harping for a long time about data, I myself conducted a waste characterization, study in the National Defense Academy over a period of 2 months in April and May. To give you a brief about the National Defense Academy, it trains our officer cadets ab initio. Every 6 months, there are 300 cadets which are inducted. There are a few foreign cadets too, in addition to these 300 cadets. Uh, the cadets typically do a 3-year term in the academy. So there are 6 terms of there are, yeah, 6 terms of 6 months each. And like I mentioned, 300 in each term. So at any given time, there are about 1,800 plus cadets. Counting the foreign cadets, it goes to about 2,200 22,000 cadets dining in one mess. So obviously, in addition to that, there are about 15 to 1,600 houses where the staff, both the civilian staff and the service staff stay. There is 7,000 acres of land over which this is established. What I have not mentioned here is NDA has about 180 horses, so there is horse manure to be taken care of. And so this became a very interesting case study. And when we used the metrics that we had used in the Pune Municipal Corporation limits, we realized that something is going amiss. And so we actually did a waste characterization and assessment audit of the whole establishment, which included a sample set of about 10% houses from every locality, which came to about 150 houses. The four messes, that is in addition to the cadets mess, there is an officers mess, there is a senior Jawan mess, there is a junior Jawan mess, and there is a DSC mess. This was a very big eye opener for us. Like you can see in the center picture, we were segregating the waste also because not much of segregation was happening. The small circle on the left is where segregated dry waste was being dumped in the cadets mess. We weighed all that waste that we collected, and based on this, we could arrive at what systems to put in place, and those are indeed being taken care of now by the National Defense Academy. Next, please. So to give you a brief of what is the range of difference in what we observed, and again, you might say that I keep harping on, carrying out data studies and requirements. What we found in the case study in National Defense Academy is what you can see. While paper and cardboard were almost matching with what was there in Pune city, there was a huge difference between the bio waste, that is 70% as against 51% in Pune. Metals were 2% as against 0.3% in Pune, and plastic bags were much lesser at 7% as against 10% in Pune. Uh, of course, the miscellaneous waste, there is a difference because there was very little construction debris that was there in India. So there lies the difference in that. Uh, so that is what I would like to say about the waste in defense establishments. Just to highlight, that uh, the waste that is generated in defense establishments is not very different from what is generated in any other part of the country. It's just that its quantum and its characteristics, in the sense that the composition of that waste varies. And this will be true for any, not only defense establishments, but this will be true for any establishment that we may take. There is therefore a need for doing a proper assessment audit of any of these establishments. I have explained to you what happens to the waste generated at sea, so that is a completely different issue altogether. And slowly but steadily, the armed forces are realizing that the waste cannot be just dumped into the open or burnt like legacy systems, and are now coming on board with, I would say, almost 60 to 70% of the establishments having some sort of a waste management system. And like what I have taken on now is to assist them in refining their systems. Uh, Next, please. I have actually finished, but I would like to leave you with a thought, which is by the, again, United Nations Division for Sustainability Development, which says that the amount of waste reflects on a society's production and consumption patterns. An indicator on the amount of waste generated is, therefore, a first approximation of the environmental pressure on air, water, and land resources. The type of waste and waste handling facilities will, of course, greatly influence its actual impact. And therefore, a sustainable waste management program will strive to minimize the amount of waste, maximize the amount of reuse and recycling, and promote appropriate waste disposal and treatment systems. With that, I have finished. If there are any questions, I would be glad to take them on.
In fact, pretty frankly speaking, everything was new to us. And the time Dr. Sameer sir suggested that I was asking him who can be our these speakers for the session, and he brought about your name. And the first thing he told was, I said, "Sir, what will be the topic?" And the moment he said that he can talk about defense establishments, immediately within no time, I said yes. Because, see, sir, we are purely academicians.
Right.
We are restricted to certain domains or certain areas. We don't know. But uh, defense, railways, it's such a big establishment. Why don't we understand how they are managing? Because we believe that the best possible disciplined life in our country, it is in the defense establishments itself. So it was very informative. We got new dimensions of it, and the way you took us progressed with in this presentation was outstanding. We could understand how, if it is made a practice with good intention, how easy it is to manage waste.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think there is somebody who is asking for permission to ask question. Mr. Manish, please unmute her, and she'll be able to.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Very nice to hear you regarding that is the waste plastic in the defensive purpose. So, many good information we got from you, and I want to ask one question. That's the wall is prepared of that particular plastic. So that the wall which is used for that particular defense is wherever they are used is there. So how much thickness of that particular wall, and how long that wall it can be maybe the durable, or how that the strength of that particular wall is there. So only plastic they are using, or something they are mixed with that particular plastic?
Ma'am, which wall are you mentioning? Because
I must intervene here actually.
Just in the before your lecture, but that time I just missed that question. But here they actually given the reference to defense actually, and that's why I'm sir asking to you, sir.
okay.
Issues. Sir, I'll just like to add. Actually, Dr. Sameer talked about one defense personnel. He had
Yes,
collected
yes,
the plastic and compressed it into bricks and made a ball out of it.
yes. I'm aware of that, ma'am. He must have been referring to a person, I think, somewhere in Sangli or Satara. He has compressed this plastic, and what he's doing is he's putting two masonry walls on the side, and instead of putting mud or stones, he has put this compressed plastic in the middle, and he's using them to make kind of a bund or a dam over small rivulets. If that, I think Dr. Samir must have been mentioning that. So he just compresses plastic and makes it into bricks, and the outer layers are the normal masonry, either brick or stone wall that he uses. It's just the filling that he uses of plastic. And though personally I don't kind of agree to that method of recycling plastic, but yes, it is one way of handling plastic waste as of now. But I sincerely believe that by not recycling this plastic, of course, these are my personal views. I have not commenting on his technology or what he's doing, but I do firmly believe that by not recycling the plastic, we are still leaving it in the environment for later generations to tackle it as and when the wall breaks or the plastic or the structure deteriorates. The plastic is going to be back in the environment. So, like I mentioned, which also Lovis ji must have mentioned, that the only solution is to, collect clean plastic and convert it into granules to get it back into its original form. Because otherwise, with my little knowledge about plastics, you all are all very, aware about this thing. But with my basic understanding, I think unless we turn plastic back into the original plastic that it is there, we are going to keep polluting the environment as time goes by. We are just delaying the process. That is all.
Yeah, in
Okay.
fact,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. For in fact, what we believe is that if you are unskilled in the area and you go on and recycle the plastic, you may end up harming the
Damage.
environment more because you
Absolutely.
are not using the correct technique or technology for that. And sir, one more curiosity that was in my mind was that we also have many defense labs or defense workshops who are manufacturing directly into manufacturing. So they also must be having some very strict waste management systems too, like the RDO labs we have.
Yes, doctor. Actually, what happens is, though the DRDO labs come under the Ministry of Defense, me as a soldier, we don't
We don't.
interact with them till the finished product is given for trials.
Yeah,
So that is kind of a realm for the academicians and the technologists to, develop something. So other than maybe a cursory visit, like since I was in aviation, I used to interact with the labs in Bangalore, who did stress tests on accident parts, etc. But then, of course, that was I would only ask them for the results because due to my background, I was not kind of qualified to comment on the metallurgy or the kind of tests they do. But I am sure they are also looking at their waste management issues. Only thing like what I would like to once again stress is that the waste generated is pretty similar. It is
yes,
the terrain which is an issue, and I'm actually seeing it firsthand now, since I'm not a tourist in Leh anymore, and I've come to sort out the waste issues here, and they are mind-boggling because how do you compost waste at -10 degrees?
that's still.
So that is where we will require the help of scientists like all of you to figure out. The next best thing is to burn it, but then I'm going to bust up 80 units of electricity every 24 hours. So is that going to save the atmosphere? It's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I'm going to compose the waste, but I'm going to consume a whole lot of electricity.
Yeah,
So that is where we would seek your help very actively to come up with technologies, especially for these areas, like Leh Ladakh and the other extreme of the desert of Jodhpur and Jaisalmer. Rest of it is pretty much taken care of. But these are the pain points that we are, and like we've been speaking to the army officers, the moment we said, so we are here to, he said, yeah, please come, tell us what we have to do and we will do it.
that's
And
their
you must
experience.
also understand, sir, this is not their primary duty. They have got more important things of guarding our border. So the earlier we give them a simple, useful technology, I think it's going to be of great help to manage the environment also. So,
That sir, is the noble idea with which these FDPs are being conducted, is that we want to engage people from different
yes,
walks
sir.
of life related to this. For example, we were not aware of this notion that our soldiers who are braving themselves at sub minus temperatures in Leh or in Siachen, they have this typical problem because they too want to engage themselves in waste,
Yes.
proper disposal of waste, but the terrain there is so difficult that they don't have ideas, and it is not their primary duty to come up with the ideas, rather it is our primary duty to
Right.
come
Right.
up with the ideas. So this interaction has to be very productive, and it has to be very frequent so that we understand their needs. They are not only there to
Yes, sir.
bear with the bullets. They have as many common problems as we have, as each one of us has, of hygiene, of
Yes.
waste. Yeah, so we must understand that it's we, the responsible people who are engaged into R&D, who are engaged into scientific thought, that we have to come up with the solutions. Otherwise, they will be suffering, or the environment there will be suffering, because they cannot carry the bags of the garbage back from Siachen and dispose of somewhere in the mainland or in plains like Chandigarh or Punjab, because it's impossible to do that. And that's a landlocked part there in Leh. You understand yourself, you
Yes.
have seen it yourself. But we don't have any options. Even down in J&K and Srinagar, there are no recyclers.
Very true, doctor.
So we can understand that, but it's very difficult for a soldier to understand. And then too, he doesn't have to live there for long.
Yes.
Normally short commissioning, or he's there for a few years or a few
Yeah.
months. So
Actually, that is another issue. The turnaround, especially in high altitude areas, is so fast
yes,
that is why we've formed, and Dr. Samir is also there to guide us. So we will be coming to you all with some kind of problem statements and asking for technological solutions, because now that I have decided to engage with them on a long-term basis, because no one really has the time while you're in service, but now that I have left it, and it's only more and more intriguing for me to find solutions for this. So I will take the liberty of contacting you all to find solutions to whatever problem statements we can form.
my immediate reaction, not only my immediate reaction, but I think most of the participants who are here listening to you, sir, our immediate reaction will be only to salute you for the determination, because contributions matter. It doesn't matter at what level you are doing it. You are a soldier as you were when you were commissioned in Navy, and you are a soldier right now because you're fighting for a cause, and that cause is going to give dividends to our society, to our country at large. So we all are with you. We'll be
Yes,
happy to contribute.
I will take on that offer very soon, sir.
Yes,
So, because there
sir.
are so many things that we've been discussing in the last 3 days. So yes, but I need to give you a proper problem statement so that the solutions can be
Yeah,
found.
I have been interacting with Dr. Samir since long, even when he
Right.
was not doctor. So
Okay.
yeah, I was the first
Right.
person I remember who referred to him as Dr. Samir Joshi, and he was very happy. He was so I know he has a lot of good expertise and experience in that, and all of us, the whole audience is with you, and we all will be happy to contribute in any possible way, whichever it is. And personally, I'll be more happy because some 2 years back, before 2 years, I was the citizen of the same state. Now that they have been bifurcated, so
Yeah.
it will be a pleasure.
Actually, sir, my background is that I've grown up in the University of Pune. My father was a
Great.
doctor in theoretical physics, and my mother did a doctorate in Marathi. So I'm the least educated in the family. So now I have to try to do something so that I can live up to their you know intelligence or their goals. So this is my small bit of working towards that.
Uh, Thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time, for your outstanding inputs on the subject, and literally this whole program has been benefited a lot by your mere presence and by your kind and wise words. You gave a new direction to our thoughts, and we all are determined and will work as much as possible on the thought process. And I request and I urge all the participants to give a good technological thinking on these issues. And whenever you come up with anything, any good suggestion, kindly send the same suggestions to captains so that a larger effect can be felt by this interaction, and it will be in the benefit of our lovely country, to the benefit of the environment as a whole, and the benefit of humanity at large. Thank you so much for being a speaker here and for being kind enough to accept my invitation.
So the privilege is all mine, sir. I mean,
It's
to
a
speak to such
privilege
an august
and
gathering.
honor, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you, sir.
we and this session here, it was indeed an enlightening session for all of us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. If I had got requests from some quarters that the presentation which I was playing about this plastic roads that was left for some time, and I will request the participants, if they can spare some time, I'll show all these videos because we had left those videos in between.
Plastic roads, the laying procedure. The laying procedure for the plastic roads will be the same from the subgrade course to the base course, like any flexible pavement. The waste plastic is accumulated and is sent into the shredder machine. The shredded plastic will measure between 10 to 15 millimeters. Fixed proportions of shredded plastic is added the same from the subgrade course to the base course, like any flexible pavement. The waste plastic is accumulated and is sent into the shredder machine. The shredded plastic will measure between 10 to 15 millimeters. Fixed proportions of shredded plastic is added to the aggregate on a conveyor belt in a hot mix plant. It is then sent to the mixer where the shredded plastic melts and forms a layer on the aggregate. This process happens at temperatures between 170 to 180 degrees centigrade. The plastic coated aggregate is then subjected to bitumen. Plastic, being a good binding material, holds the bitumen together. The final BT mix is collected and loaded into the paver. In the final step, the plastic coated bituminous mix is laid according to the alignment and is compacted as per the standards. Plastic roads, a perfect solution. We are spending 4.5 trillion rupees on annual maintenance of roads and similar infrastructure. They are cost effective with nil maintenance.
Building longer-lasting roads and pavements is all about keeping subgrade and subbase materials stable, even in challenging site conditions. Under pavements, designing a strong, stable base that resists movement has a powerful effect on reducing maintenance and stopping the deterioration that ultimately causes pavements to fail. The best way to do this is with a GeoWeb 3D soil stabilization system, especially when dealing with soft subgrades. 3D confinement delivers higher performance and offers adaptability with varying fill materials, subgrades, and loading stresses. Fill and base materials are safely contained in a geocellular structure and highly resistant to movement. For unpaved roads, GeoWeb confinement cuts base requirements in half. Even when using on-site poor quality fill, no need to haul clean aggregate into sites. You'll also use less base, and using local materials can cut the installation time and cost dramatically. Over soft subgrades, one GeoWeb layer does the job of 3 GeoGrid layers. Once filled, you can drive on it immediately. With confined open graded aggregate, 3D porous pavements are an eco-friendly way to manage stormwater. The pavement layer infiltrates water extremely fast and stores it for natural percolation. This is a big benefit for reducing the cost, size, and need for stormwater infrastructure. You can also eliminate low and soft shoulders problems with grassed or aggregate shoulders. You'll reduce rutting and erosion while maintaining safe, drivable functionality and cut your maintenance costs for repairs. Emergency repairs are fast and easy with this product on hand. You can see why the GeoWeb 3D system is such a versatile solution for roads and pavements. We can tailor a solution for your site challenges with our free project evaluation service. How can we help you with your
So we are virtually, I tried to update the knowledge on your how to make plastic roads and what exactly goes on behind the scenes. Even I have worked practically with a company who is manufacturing probably the only company who are exclusively manufacturing these GeoWebs in India. And I got a feedback that these GeoWebs are now used in Himachal and other hilly areas wherein soil erosion is very fast, and they are using it on low hills. And the best part is that once, if it's not, the top layer is not concrete, they have seen very good growth of vegetation over the stretch. And since the topsoil is retained, the land remains fertile for long, and the vegetation is safe. So the practical aspects of having plastics for saving environment, this is something which is not known to everyone. Probably it may be known to you, but not all of you. So that's why I try to incorporate these things into today's session. And I am thankful to all of you that you have been with us for all the 3 sessions, and especially thankful to the speakers who managed to have some time despite they being on duty in such a difficult terrain on inlay, and sparing some time for us. So I'm thankful to all of you, and to the presenters, to the people who have been with us since morning. I request all of you to please mark your attendance, send the feedback. And in the meantime, if you want something more, I can ensure that I'll be presenting that to you. And Mr. Lovish and Captain both have permitted me to share the presentation. I'll definitely share it like I shared yesterday. And in the meantime, let me ask if Dr. Samir also allows me, so that I can share all the three of these. And if there is anything, whatever you feel convenient, or whatever you feel important for us to incorporate in next 2 days of this FDP, will be happy to incorporate that. And I'm sure all of you must have been benefited by the wise words of our speakers and the perspective with which this FDP is being organized is finding a reason. And I am thankful to all of you.